Well, Justin Trudeau announced $200 million in funding today, and this is to help Canada's most vulnerable people. But the Prime Minister's daily briefing was overshadowed by new tension that's been sparked by Donald Trump. The U.S. president ordering American manufacturer 3M to stop sending surgical-grade masks to Canada. Trudeau says he does plan to talk shortly to Trump about the freeze. But he also announced that millions of other masks will be arriving here in a few days, not from the U.S., but from China. Now, that said, the Ontario Premier, well, he had a much more forceful response to what Trump is saying. Among other things, Doug Ford calling the mask ban unacceptable. And like Trudeau, he raised the essential Canadian healthcare workers who cross the border every day from Windsor to work in Detroit, Michigan.
How would the people in Michigan feel? The governor in Michigan, if all of a sudden we said, okay, the 1,000 nurses, we're in desperate need. You need to stay here in Ontario and you aren't going down to Michigan. You know, would that be a wake-up call for them? But it shouldn't come down to that. It shouldn't go to from tit to tat, back and forth. It just doesn't work. Just work with us. We're stronger together than we are separated.
Well, for more, let's bring in Chris Glover right now as he was listening to the Ontario Premier as he was speaking today. You know, very interesting to see such a forceful reaction from Premier Ford. Talk to us about what else we heard from him.
Yeah, forceful indeed, and he's known to be the kind of person that doesn't hold punches. So it's in some ways not surprising to see Doug Ford come out so strongly against the President of the United States over this order, but he certainly seemed frustrated in that press conference just a short while ago. And he also said that he was using this example as a reason why Health Canada needs to move very quickly in order to move up the approval process for manufacturers here in Canada and specifically in Ontario, so we can have made in Ontario and made in Canada solutions to prevent something like this from happening, even from an alleged best friend like the United States, from ever happening again. I want you to listen to a little bit more from Premier Doug Ford today.
Well, when you sit back and you think of your allies and the wars we've gone through, and we've stood shoulder to shoulder fighting the same enemies, and now we have an enemy and we're at war, and they want to shut things down with their closest ally in the world. That's unacceptable. You know, we're part of the family, if you want to call it that. There's no two countries that have a closer connection, that are more intertwined than the United States and Canada.
And Michael, he is certainly not the only Canadian premier who is speaking out against Donald Trump. Jason Kenney, Alberta's premier, today tweeting that he, as a Canadian, is absolutely insulted by this decision from Donald Trump. And he's saying that it's no way to treat a friend. He also went on to say that if he was able to speak to Donald Trump directly, he would be reminding him of Canada's solidarity and contributions during 9/11. So not the only premier speaking about how we are at crisis right now. We're in a problem situation, and certainly the world needs to be working together, not putting decisions like this in place.
Mm-hmm. You know, it was also interesting to hear Doug Ford, even before we got to you, talking about the nurses who are Canadian that cross the border every day to work in U.S. hospitals. So does that raise the specter of perhaps retaliatory measures?
It's certainly something that is being talked about, but more, as you heard from Doug Ford there, talking about how that would be a wake-up call. But we did hear from Doug Ford, the Prime Minister, earlier today, that no retaliatory measures are going to take place in this country. None of them are being planned. They just said that would not be right given the circumstances. But as you bring up the number of nurses, some 1,000 nurses in Windsor, Ontario, who cross the border into Detroit to go to work every day, Doug Ford brought that up, but so too did the mayor of Windsor, who we spoke to earlier today. He had a very disparaging comparison when he was speaking about Donald Trump. Listen to this.
Suggesting that, you know, we're going to hoard, much like, you know, people are hoarding toilet paper. This decision by the president, this behavior, certainly just stands to play a much more deadly and dangerous game. It is immoral and it's inhumane.
So the anger is palpable from Canadian leaders municipally, provincially, and certainly federally as well. And so everybody is going to be watching this press conference with the American president that we are expecting to take live in just a few minutes now.
Okay, Chris, thank you.